Hi there, here's a video with an answer key for the blue and green assignment, addressing some of the most common mistakes in the assignment. Generally, voicings were too high. You should try to keep them below C5, down in the lower reaches of the treble clef with some lower ledger lines. And there were a lot of chord spelling mistakes. Specifically, four-way close. People who, when you didn't pay attention to the key signature, lots of errors resulted from that. There was only one flat, it was B flat, but a lot of people missed that and wrote B flats when they should be writing B naturals and so on. Sometimes people didn't have four notes in a voicing. It's four-way close. You need to have four notes in the voicing. And then things like not spelling sharp 9 correctly. For example, this chord is very common on the A7 sharp 9. There would be a chord right here. People would spell, they would just not put a B sharp, they'd put a B natural. So here's my suggestion on how to avoid those kinds of errors. And the following technique for avoiding chord spelling errors. So I zero in on that chord. That's my A7 augmented sharp 9. So let's go back. Just start with a root position chord. Build up your 3rd, 5th, and 7th. Make sure your note content of your basic chord is correct. Root, may need a major 3rd, need an augmented 5th. Then do your 9 for 1 substitution. 1 has to become a 9. What kind of 9 is that? Check the key signature. It's a flat 9. Hit the plus key once to make it a natural 9. Hit it again to make it a sharp 9. Then you've got the right note content, and then you can decide whether to do some adjustments for voice leading. If you do it that way, if you start with the chord content first in root position, do your tension substitution, and then do the voice leading, you'll be less likely to make those kinds of mistakes. It's always important to pay attention to the voice leading, so people didn't do that. And then a lot of people just missed, that this is a D flat 7 chord, it has a flat 7 in it, it's a dominant chord, and they wrote that note as not C flat, but as C natural, and created a major 7 sharp 9 chord instead of a D flat augmented with a sharp 9. 7 chord with a sharp 9. Okay, moving over to hybrid. Again, the number one cause of errors was not paying close attention to the key signature. A lot of people ignored what I wrote above the chords, or maybe just didn't understand it sometimes. Next time I'm going to try to make it simpler, but anyway. And then the other thing was not using chord scale material for the upper structures, and thus winding up with hybrids which had notes in them which were void notes, which negated the function of the chord. So let's go through this and figure out what we should have done. So obviously you needed to do your analysis, and you needed to come up with the correct chord scales. From those chord scales you can derive the hybrid. This is obviously a Dorian chord scale, and we've got a Dorian hybrid. Remember, Dorian is one of those chord scales that gives you a hybrid from all the available point. It gives you from the 2, from the 5, and the 7. This is a flat 7, major 7 over the root. This was just meant to be a four-way close. This is an Aeolian and ended up with 5 minor over 1. You could have had some other Aeolian possibilities here too. This was one of the things where you could have just done a four-way close, because anytime you have a sharp 9 you can't really have a hybrid. But the other option was to substitute and ignore the sharp 9 and just do a hybrid that has the melody note in it, which was a sharp 11. And this was one of many possibilities that would have given you that G natural. But some people did things like put a C major over D flat, and of course then the C was a major 7, and that was a problem. Moving on, this is a Dorian sound. Here's 5 minor over 1, but it could have been 2 minor over 1. It could have been flat 7, major 7 over 1. Here's that exception voicing, exception because it does contain the 3rd of the chord, but it is used a lot. The easiest way to remember this is it's a major triad over a root, which gives you the sound of flat 9 and major 13, flat 9 and major 13 as a substitute for a dominant sound. And it is, as you can see, a D major triad. D is the 13, F sharp is the flat 9, and A is the 3rd. It's exception because it does have the 3rd of the chord in it. The way to remember it is major triad built on the 6th degree of a dominant chord will give you flat 9 and 13. This is a Lydian voicing. There's lots of other Lydian voicing possibilities. This could have been just a four-way close, but if you wanted to try an alternative approach where you get flat 9 and 13, you could have used that same voicing. Major triad over the root of a dominant chord, in this case F sharp major over A, gives you that major 13 flat 9 sound. This one required that you have a B natural in it, and so you had to use Dorian sounds. This is a flat 7 major 7 over 1. This was not going to be a hybrid. This you needed to look for the melodic minor scale or the harmonic minor scale, and you would have gotten 5/7 over 1. And this wasn't a hybrid. Okay, moving on to polychords. And I should say one of the reasons why I did this is so that you could get used to what it sounded like as four-way close. Then you could hear how it was different with hybrids, and then you could hear how it was different with polychords. So at the end of this video, I'm just going to play through the whole file from beginning to end, and hopefully you can sort of appreciate some of the differences that result from these different techniques. Okay, now we're on to polychords. This became unnecessarily complicated, partly maybe because all the possibilities are not on that chart. I tried to make that clear that I hadn't put all the possibilities on the chart. But what I'm going to do now is attempt to show you once again the simplest way to do polychords. So what you do is you start with, and I'll look at our common mistakes. The basic approach is that you have the fundamental chord sound in the bass clef, and to achieve that fundamental sound you need a 1, 3, and 7. And then you put tensions and sometimes chord tone duplications in the treble clef. And that's all there is to it. So if I was going to have you do this again, what I would say is just don't even do the upper structure first. Just do all the lower structures. Root, third, seventh, root, third, seventh, root, third, seventh, root, third, seventh. So that would be stage one. Get your lower structure, root, third, seventh. Then your upper structure, you look at the chord symbol or the melody content, and you make sure that your upper structure has that in it, and you look for structures that contain those notes. So here I would be looking for a Dorian sound that has an E in it, and I came up with an F major 7. And then we go over here and we just look for, okay, sharp 9. What is sharp 9? It's a C, so we need to make sure that we have a C in our upper structure. The other notes need to either be chord tone duplications, as they are here, or available tensions. Now that we have a C triad, the first thing you should think about is, especially if you're in a hurry, is can I reuse that C chord triad on this chord? And you ask yourself, well, let's see. Does the C work? Yes, the C is the flat 7. Does the G work? Yes, it's an 11. An available tension. Does the E work? Yes, not only does it work, it's a 9, and we need to have a 9. So all you do is just keep the C. Just move right along. This is a slightly different example here to make the process a little clearer. So we've got our lower structure for our D flat 7 chord, our root, a third and a seventh, flat 7. And it's time to create this structure, and so we know we need sharp 5, which we're going to call it a flat 13, treat it like a tension. And we know that we need a sharp 9, so let's figure out those notes. So the sharp 9 is, you could call it an F flat, but let's call it an E, just because it's easier to think about it that way. Our augmented fifth rethought of as a flat 13 is an A natural. Then you just say, okay, those are 2 of 3 notes in a triad. What's a third note that could make this into a triad? What triad has an A and an E in it? And I think without too much thinking, you could figure out that the answer is chord is an A major, sorry. But you might have thought of A minor, but then it would have given you a C natural, and that wouldn't work with this chord. So by going like that, you could easily come up with an answer just very organically that would relate to what you came before. So an A over D flat 7. For this one, it's a Dorian sound, and you know you need an F in it because it's in the melody. There's a number of different options there, but again, you could take this minimalist approach of saying, well, what do I really need? I have my chord sound on the bottom. I need a 9, so I need a D, and then could I do an 11 and a 13? And the answer is yes, because it's Dorian. I could have come up with some other solutions like B flat over C minor would have given you this sound. And once you've got a voicing, again, you try to think, can I keep that? Is there any way I could just keep that? And the answer is yes, except you change it to a D major, so you get the flat 9. then you try to keep as similar as you can. Now you can't keep a D major here because that would give you a F sharp, which would be a sharp 5 on the chord. So you can just say, can I keep the A? Yes. Can I keep the F sharp? No. I got to change it to an F natural. The D goes to a C, and you end up with an F triad over B flat. Now what that doesn't give you is it doesn't give you the Lydian sound of the E. That's already in the melody. If you wanted a Lydian sound in your voicing, then you would come up with a different voicing, like maybe C triad. Sound from the previous voicing, which if you recall was an F triad over B flat, major 7. Again, you ask yourself, can I keep that same triad? And if you really thought it through, you'd realize yes, you can, and you'd get this sound. An F triad over a dominant chord. Flat 6 triad over dominant chord gives you flat 13, same as sharp 5, doubles the root, and it gives you a sharp 9. Then you could keep an F triad here, but you wouldn't get your 9, so you wouldn't get your 13, so you needed a B natural. So you start with a B natural. Think about triads that give you a B natural that come from Dorian, and you probably pretty quickly come up with a G. There are other options. You could have used C major 7, so on. Previously we had a flat 13 to sharp 9 sound. You could just use that same voicing, major triad built on the flat 6th degree. The other one I had previously would also work, but it wouldn't have contained this note in it. C over E7 is the most obvious choice. And then we come over here and we look for a triad that gives us a G sharp because we need the all-important major 7. C augmented is a good choice there, and you can be looking around for that in scales that include minor major 7ths in them, like harmonic minor and melodic minor. Last but not least, let's create this one together with this minimalist approach. So we know we need a D minor 7 sound. Our lower structure doesn't currently have a C in it, although we could do that, but since it doesn't, we need a C, so we start with a C. And we just try a triad based on that. E, yes, 9, G, yes, 11. You could have C over D minor. Do you need to know what chord scale you're dealing with? Yes, but the process of deriving polychords just from chord scales is sometimes rather time consuming, so it's better if you have a sense of what triads are available in different chord scales, but also just let your process be driven by what is the note content you absolutely need to have. And the absolutely need to have is what's governed by the melody, what the melody is telling you, and what the tensions in the chord symbols are telling you. So if you let those two things drive your choices about what to use in the upper structure, you probably will zero in on a chord that's going to work faster than if you go mining through a chord scale and writing out all the triads and everything. That said, it's really great to have certain key triad and 7th chord upper structures in your memory in relation to certain chord scales to also speed up the process. All right, here we go. Now I'm going to play the whole file, starting with 4-way close, going to hybrids, and then going to polychords.